Janmadyasya yatam vayaritarata's jate swavigyaswara. Tene brahma hridaya adhikavaye mujantija suraya. Tejo varim hridayata vinimayo jatra trisagumrusya. Dhamna svena sada nirhasta kuhakam satyang param dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire, or land seen on water. Only because of him, due to material universes, temporarily manifested by the reaction with three modes of material nature, appear factual although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma Prujita Kaitaputro Vidyan Vastavam Astra Vastu Shivaram Taputra Yomarana Srimad Bhagvatam Mahamuni
Kimva Purerishva Sadyo Hridi Avarudya Tetra Krite Bihesa Susabhistaksha. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Rejecting all religious activities which are material motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam Sukamakad amrita dravya samyutam Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam Muhur ahoraska bhuvi bhavukaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagvatam. the mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, even though its nectarian juice was already relishable for all. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantaksto Bhadrani Vidurnati Srihitsatam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is in itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend and purifies a devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nasta presu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in a devotional service of the Lord. Tadarajas-tamo bhavo kama lobhadayaschaye chetetarinabhidam stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso bhagavat bhakti yogataha bhagavat tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate hridaya grantis chidyante sarva samsaya shiyante chasya karmani drista eva atmanishvare. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 1, Chapter 14, text number 33. Also, Shrutadeva, Uddhava, and others, Nanda, Sunanda, and other leaders of liberated souls who are constant companions of the Lord are protected by Lord Balaram and Krishna. Are they all doing well in their respective functions? Do they, who are all eternally bound in friendship with us, remember our welfare? Purport by His Divine Grace. Huh? We're on text 30? Yeah, that is text 30. Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. So, text 30. Pradumna sarva vrishninam Sukamaste Maharata
Sukham aste maharataha.
Gambira Rayo Nirudo
Gambhirayo nirudro.
Vardate Bhagavanvita.
Vardhate bhagavanvita.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. How is Pradyumna, the great general of the Vrishni family? Is he happy? And is Aniruddha, the plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead, faring well? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Pradyumna and Aniruddha are also expansions of the personality of Godhead, and thus they are also Vishnu Tattva. At Dwarka, Lord Vasudeva is engaged in his transcendental pastimes along with his plenary expansions, namely Sankar's son, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and therefore each and every one of them can be addressed as the personality of Godhead, as is mentioned in connection with the name Aniruddha. Text 31. Susenas charudenascha
Susenascha rudeshnascha.
Sambho Jambavati Sutta
Shambho jambavati sutta.
Anyecha Karshni Pravara
Anecha karshni pravara.
Saputra Rishabhadaya.
Saputra rishabhadaya.
Are all the chieftain sons of Lord Krishna, such as Susena, Charudesna, Samba, and the son of Jambavati, Samba, the son of Jambavati, and Rishabha, along with their sons, all doing well? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As already mentioned, Lord Krishna married 16,108 wives, and each of them had 10 sons. Therefore, 16,108 times 10 is 161,080 sons. They all grew up, and each of them had as many sons as their father. And the whole aggregate was something near 1,610,800 family members of the Lord. The Lord is the Father of all living beings, who are countless in number. Therefore, only a few of them are called to associate with the Lord in his transcendental pastimes as the Lord of Dwarka on this earth. It is not astonishing that the Lord maintained a visible family consisting of so many members. It is better to refrain from comparing the Lord's position to ours, and it becomes a simple truth as soon as we understand at least a partial calculation of the Lord's transcendental position. King Yudhisthira, while inquiring about the Lord's sons and grandsons at Dwarka, mentioned only the chieftains amongst them, for it was impossible for him to remember all the names of the Lord's family members. Well, this is an important statement that Prabhupada made. It says, it is better to refrain from comparing the Lord's position to ours. And it becomes a simple truth as soon as we understand at least a partial calculation of the Lord's transcendental position. So no one can understand a complete calculation of the Lord's transcendental position. But we can understand in general that the Lord has unlimited powers, infinite powers. Unless we accept that, we remain an atheist. Because we'll hear certain things and we'll say, oh, I can't believe that. That's not possible. Well, it's not possible for us. But everything is possible for Krishna. So as long as we want to limit Krishna and his powers to be subordinate to our limited thinking, then we remain an atheist. We don't really become a devotee. Text 32 and 33. Tataivanuchara sore Shruta devod davadaya Sunandananda Sirsanya Yechanye Satvatar Sabya Apiswastyasate Sarve Rama Krishna Pujasraya Apismaranti Kushalam Asmakam Vadasorida. Also, Shrutadev, Uddhava, and others, Nanda, Sananda, and other leaders of liberated souls who are constant companions of the Lord are protected by Lord Balaram and Krishna. Are they all doing well in their respective functions? Do they, who are all eternally bound in friendship with us, remember our welfare? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The constant companions of Lord Krishna, such as Uddhava, are all liberated souls, and they descended along with the Lord to this material world to fulfill the mission of the Lord. The Pandavas are also liberated souls who descended along with Lord Krishna to serve him in his transcendental pastimes on this earth. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.8, the Lord and his eternal associates, who are also liberated souls, like the Lord, come down on the earth at certain intervals. The Lord remembers them all, but his associates, although liberated souls, forget due to their being tatastha shakti, or marginal potency of the Lord. That is a difference between Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva. The Jiva Tattvas are infinitesimal potential particles of the Lord, and therefore they require the protection of the Lord at all times. And to the eternal servitors of the Lord is pleased to give all protection at all times. The liberated souls never, therefore, think themselves as free as the Lord or as powerful as the Lord, but they always seek the protection of the Lord in all circumstances, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. This dependence of the liberated soul is constitutional. For the liberated souls are like sparks of a fire that are able to exhibit the glow of fire along with the fire and not independently. Independently, the glow of the sparks is extinguished, although the quality of fire or the glowing is there. Thus, those who give up the protection of the Lord and become so-called lords themselves out of spiritual ignorance come back again to this material world even after prolonged tapasya of the severest type. That is the verdict of all Vedic literature. So now this is a monumental purport because the constitutional position of the living entity is dependence on the Lord. That's why modern thought, such as man is independent of God, there's no God, therefore man has to be a hero in the material world and be responsible for himself and use his own reason and logic and science to improve the imperfections of nature, etc., etc. It's all nonsense. It's all misleading, and it only complicates life for people. So, in this atmosphere of everything minus God, or godless theology, godless science, godless sociology, godless archaeology, etc., etc., people develop this false idea of independence. Due to that false idea of independence, they become more and more entangled in the karmic reactions to their sinful activities. At the same time, they're convinced that what they're doing is right. That is the number one symptom of ignorance, being convinced that the wrong things you do are actually right. And eventually, people replace wrong things and call them right things. Just like now, some people think that abortion is a heroic act of a woman who should have complete control of her own body. Well, let's analyze this idea that a woman should have complete control of her own body. So, on that basis, a woman can have an abortion because a fetus is no more than a little piece of tissue So what's the harm of getting rid of a little piece of tissue? See, so through these types of word jugglery, people become convinced that it's okay to have an abortion. However, if a woman stands on a public street, takes a knife and says, I'm going to cut off my pinky. Pinky means little finger, right? What would happen? What do you think would happen? People would call the police. The police would come and try and stop the woman from cutting off her finger. Or if she succeeded in cutting off her finger, they would take her to the hospital. And they would have her psychologically examined for perverted behavior. So it's okay for her to have a baby killed that's in her womb. But if she tries to cut off a little piece of her pinky finger, she would be psychologically analyzed and determined to be sick mentally. You see how there is a double standard. If she tries to cut off her finger, she's crazy. If she tries to kill her baby, she's a hero. You see. So this is the word jugglery and nonsense of modern rationalism and science. It's just like once there was a man who died. The coroner came, examined him, and issued the death certificate. Then a funeral was arranged. This is in India, so they put the dead body on a cot, and then you have some people holding up the cot, and they started walking toward the cremation ground, which is on the bank of the Ganges. While they were walking, the man woke up and sat up on the cot and said, "What's going on?" And everyone looked at him and said, "You're dead." He said, "I'm not dead." And then a politician that was there said, "Wait a minute. We have to have a vote. And we have to have some experts come here and give us some advice." So they called the coroner. The coroner comes and they said, "Is this man dead?" He said, "Well, here's the death certificate. I examined it. He was dead." "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we'll take a vote, but it'll be a silent vote. We won't have you raise your hands, yes or no. You have to write on a piece of paper. Now we have the evidence that he is dead. What is your conclusion?" So they had a vote, and the majority voted that he was dead. And the guy said, "Wait a minute, I'm not dead." They said, "Shut up." And they muzzled his mouth, tied him up, and they took him and burned him. This is the danger of the politicians and scientists joining forces, joining together. So the same thing happened, I think it was 1963, in Roe versus Wade, where the question of abortion was discussed in the Supreme Court of the United States. So they brought in the scientists, just like the coroner was the scientist. So they brought in the scientists. They said they were trying to determine whether a fetus in the womb of a mother is protected by the Constitution of the United States. Right. So they have to determine, is the fetus a fully developed human being? So the so-called scientists said no. And then they gave a bunch of technical gobbledygook. They said, well, it's not until the 7th month that there is some consciousness, but it's not fully developed, and it's really actually not until the fetus is pushed out and born that it's actually a person. So, with that phony evaluation of whether the fetus is actually a person or not, and whether it's, and then the politicians got into the act and said, well, then it's not, that fetus is not protected by the Constitution of the United States. It's not actually a person, according to our scientists. Therefore, abortion is legalized, which means it's infanticide. It's killing babies. It's killing human beings. And therefore, every year in the United States, between 1 and 1.5 million young Americans are murdered. And it's legal. You see, that's what happens when the scientists and the politicians get together. They juggle the words, they juggle the statistics, they juggle the theories, and they come up with a completely demoniac conclusion. So, therefore, here, Prabhupada explains that this dependence of the liberated soul is constitutional. So if we don't depend on Krishna for in every circumstance, we become like these rationalists or empiricists, scientists and philosophers, and we begin to speculate. And there's a saying in French, with an if, one can put the entire city of Paris into a bottle of wine. Avec un si, on peut mettre la ville de Paris dans une bouteille de vin. So, yeah, as soon as you start to speculate and you say maybe, perhaps, why not, let us assume that, and blah, 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 or if this, then that, we can accommodate anything, including murder of children, through fake science and judicial, basically, nonsense. So there's no such thing as independence. Everyone is dependent on the Lord in one way or other. And as long as this type of philosophy that man is independent, and that's epitomized by one of the famous French existential philosophers, Jean-Paul Sartre, who said, man is heroically independent in the material world. And he has to face the challenges of nature and solve them by himself. In other words, he's explaining this philosophy of independence. And it seems to be heroic, it seems to be noble, it seems to put man on a high pedestal and diminish God to something insignificant. It's all done with word jugglery and a lot of bravado and nonsense. So, Prabhupada continues, he says, the liberated souls never, therefore, think themselves as free as the Lord or as powerful as the Lord, but they always seek the protection of the Lord in all circumstances, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. This dependence of the liberated soul is constitutional. That means you can't change it. That's the way we're made. For the liberated souls are like sparks of a fire that are able to exhibit the glow of fire along with the fire and not independently. Independently, the glow of the sparks is extinguished, although the quality of fire or the glowing is there. Thus, those who give up the protection of the Lord and become so-called lords themselves out of spiritual ignorance come back again to this material world even after prolonged tapasya of the severest type. That is the verdict of all Vedic literature. So this is a very significant purport, and it's something that should be part of our regular preaching, because the opposite of this is part of the atheist preaching. And they convince people who have no knowledge that we're all independent. There's no such thing as God. Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.